All right. So, how many times have you heard the phrase, don't fight in front of your kids? Probably 1,000 times, whether you're married, going through a divorce, already divorced. Fighting in front of the kids makes them anxious, makes them upset, help, doesn't make them feel secure. It makes them feel the opposite. Well, guess what? Your dog, your pets, they're the same way. And what I want to talk about today with my guest is my dog is anxious thanks to my divorce. To talk about anxiety in dogs, how a divorce can affect them, what to do to make sure your dog is okay through the divorce, I have a great guest. Her name is Karis Nafty, and Karis is the founder of her practice called Who Keeps the Dog, which is a pet custody mediation practice. Karis has been a dog behavior therapist for 25 years. And what she does now, she still does that, but she also does pet custody mediation. She is a speaker. She works with divorce professionals to help you when it comes to custody arrangements for your dog in a divorce. So, hi, Karis.
Hi, Jackie.
Did I leave anything out? Because you do a lot of things.
Well, you left out the most important thing, that I am also an author. My
Right,
book
but
is
I was
available.
saving that. I was saving that because that is big news and that is what is new with you. So I want to, why don't you take this opportunity, tell my listeners about your new book, which literally just came out on Amazon less than a week ago.
Thanks, Jackie. So the book is a guidebook for people who are getting a divorce or going through a breakup, and there are animals in the picture, specifically dogs in the picture. And the book is written to guide you or to offer suggestions or to offer insight in that impossible place of that kind of thunk of realization that can hit you like in the pit of your stomach when on top of everything you know your relationship is over and you go, oh my gosh, what about the dog? Who is going to keep the dog? And that my book is written to help you answer that question.
So the book is called Who Keeps the Dog? Navigating Pet Custody During Divorce. And before the show, Karis was telling me it's published by Dogwise Publishers, which is a publisher that only publishes books on animals, and they're extremely well known and well respected. And the reason I want my listeners to know is they would never have published this book unless, they have very high standards. So sorry, I should say it. So we'll edit that part out. So you can get Karis's book on Amazon, or you can work with Karis, and both are under the same title, whokeepsthedog.com. That will take you to the book. It will also take you to contact Karis, and then you can also find the book on Amazon. All right, I want to talk about, did you agree with my comment at the beginning of the show? Like, you can't fight in front of your dog. It's going to have an effect on the dog.
Yes. The short answer is absolutely yes. Yeah.
And what are some symptoms that you might think you don't really know what's going on with your dog? And really, it's because the dog is being affected by your divorce, you're fighting. He knows maybe one person moved out. What are some things to look for?
The things to look for in your dog when they are having behavior problems of any kind is, first of all, just a change in your dog's behavior. So, for example, there are some dogs who really love to chew. Like for them, that's their hobby and that's their happy place, is ripping stuff up, whether it's soft things or hard things, things inside or out in the garden. So if you have a dog who naturally chews all the time, for that dog, it might not be a sign of stress. It might just be the thing that they really enjoy doing. Whereas if you had a dog who has never really chewed on anything, and you come home and something has been sort of destroyed in your house, you know, our first instinct as people is to go, well, the dog is sending me a message, or the dog is angry at me, and there, that is why it chewed up my favorite pair of gym shoes. But dogs are not that complicated. Dogs don't do things with forethought. They just do things that meet their needs. And chewing is a great kind of stress reliever. It's a way to deal with frustration for dogs. So that can be a sign of anxiety, is a dog chewing that never really chewed. But over and above it, it's like if your dog is changing from being very outgoing to being very withdrawn, or if you had a dog who was always like, you know, super, super, super mellow and has become really, really hyper, that can be a sign of being anxious. A big one is problems with house training. So if you have a dog who's suddenly like peeing in the house or pooing in the house or doing any of those sort of things when it's never been an issue or not since they were younger, those can also be a sign that your dog is trying to tell you something. And when I say that, again, I'm not trying to say the dog is sending a message consciously, but they are reacting to a stressful situation in the only way that they can, given their breed and kind of their personal history.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. So another thing, symptom that I think is that a dog might stop eating,
Mhm.
you know, and you might
So
think your dog's sick, but it could be emotional.
So absolutely. And this is where things get tricky. And I mentioned this, not to plug the book again, but I mentioned this specifically in the book, that definitely your dog can stop eating, but all of the signs that can be something like the dog is anxious or the dog is stressed are also signs that a dog can be sick. So if your dog is showing, like if your dog is suddenly withdrawn, don't assume they're anxious. First think, oh, I hope my dog is not is feeling okay physically. So it's crucial that you first get your dog's health checked out. But when you're at the vet, you need to be honest with them also about everything else that's going on in your life. You need to be able to, you know, just tell them that you're going through a difficult time. And what's really helpful to know, because I think the emotions that happen around pet owners and pet guardians around divorce can be so layered and complicated. You know, we can feel so guilty and we don't want our animal to feel stressed. So it can be such a trying time. What's helpful to know is that dogs react to any stressful time their owner's going through in the same way. Like if you lose your job and you're going through that kind of stress, you're likely to see a very similar reaction in your dog than sort of specifically one of divorce. So it's like dog stress reaction is is their reaction to a house, or when I say a house, I sort of mean their home environment or their owner or their owners acting in a way that the dog doesn't understand. The dog is now feeling unsure of how their person is going to react to them. So dogs, you know, they kind of get used to your own personality. And then if you are suddenly much more emotional, if you are acting out of character for yourself because you're angry or because you're sad or because you just feeling lost in this divorce reality that you are now having to deal with, your dog can become, they can become scared of you. I know that sounds a bit mean, but scared because they're not, your reactions are different. And so there's ways that we can help dogs feel okay, even when life is not okay, because yeah, that's what happens.
Well, think about it. When you're going through a divorce, you might be crying every day. You might, and people say don't cry in front of your kids. So you might go in another room, but guess who's in your room with you while you're crying? Your dog. And maybe you can't cry in front of your dog, or maybe hold your dog and cry, but not like, if you're wailing and screaming, but if you're just weeping and you want to hold your dog, I kind of think that's okay. But really, don't beat yourself up if you're crying all the time. It doesn't mean you should not cry, but just think your dog is watching just like your kids are.
Mhm. And you're correct. What I would say though, and what I really encourage people to do, if you are crying physically, I wouldn't hug your dog. I wouldn't sort of, I'm sorry
Okay.
to say it, but what you can do is you can sit in the room with them. And if your dog chooses to come closer to you, that's your dog's choice. if your dog, so I have 3 dogs. I used to have 6, and then some of them have gotten old recently in the last few years. But of my 3 dogs, okay, if I am having a bad day, one of my dogs, I can tell you, my oldest dog will go hide in the backyard. He does not like big emotions. He's like, nope, this is not my vibe. And he will just go and hide until the house feels calm. One of my other dogs will just start to bring me toys. He's like, hey, how about we play? Why don't we play fetch? Don't you want a squeaky ball, Mom? And that is his reaction to me feeling emotional. And then my third dog will try to climb into my shirt and try to, his natural reaction is to get as physically close to me as or anybody else who's having kind of a funny day. And that's natural for him. But I would never force a dog physically to sort of be hugged. But if they're choosing to be there with you, that's a very different story. And especially if there's children in the picture, because I know a lot of children really rely on dogs emotionally. It's really important that parents keep an eye on how the dog is handling the child's emotions, because you don't want to put a dog in a situation where they're around a child that's too emotional and the dog is overwhelmed by it, because not all dogs can handle overwhelming emotions from anybody, and especially children sometimes.
You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today we are talking about anxiety in dogs and how divorce can affect that. My guest is Karis Nafty, certified dog behavior consultant, accredited mediator, and the founder of her practice called Who Keeps the Dog, same name as her new book, Who Keeps the Dog, Navigating Pet Custody During Divorce. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about things you can do when you see this anxiety, or I should say more things you can do, and then also what you can do with your soon-to-be ex to minimize the anxiety in your dog. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. I'm here today with certified dog behavior consultant, Karis Nafty. Karis is also an accredited mediator and the founder of her practice, Who Keeps the Dog. And we are talking about anxiety in your dog thanks to your divorce. Okay, Karis, what are some things you can do if you feel like your dog is you've now identified, okay, this divorce is affecting my dog. And what are some things that you can do?
So the first,
Besides stop the behaviors, that you think your dog is reacting to.
yeah. Yeah, certainly that's the first choice, but that's, easier said than done. It's just not, it just simply doesn't always happen that way. So in an ideal world, yes, you'd be able to control your own feelings as much as possible. But even then, sometimes animals can be stressed. So some things you can do to help your dog is, first of all, make sure that nothing is physically wrong with your dog. So just have a vet that you're in dialogue with during this time. Then the next, there's a few ways to look at this. The one is you need to make sure your dog is getting enough rest. Now, I say this because what's really popular nowadays are doggy daycares, and I used to run a doggy daycare. Like, doggy daycares can be really helpful, wonderful things. However, doggy daycares, depending on how they're run and what their structure is, I always say it's like going to a nightclub for dogs. It's really busy, it's really active, and some people think that, okay, I'm just going to send my dog to doggy daycare every day because the dog is stressed being at home. And too much exercise can be as stressful as not enough exercise. So dogs need, some dogs need between 12 and 17 hours of sleep every day. So you need to make sure that your dog is getting sufficient time for resting. If you are at home all day with your dog and you're upset and your dog isn't able to decompress and sleep enough, that's something that you can work on. Find a way to allow your dog to get all the rest that they need. They should dream during the day. Those cute little things dogs do where they run and their paws twitch. It's so cute. So dog needs enough rest. And then, of course, the flip side is your dog needs enough exercise, because a dog that's not getting sufficient exercise, especially during a stressful time, will get more wound up and kind of more, their energy can go inside of themselves. That's when you see the chewing and sometimes the barking or the getting a bit snappy sometimes. I'm oversimplifying it, but those can be some signs that your dog is just frustrated, not because of the divorce, but maybe because you stopped walking them, or you're not going to the dog park because you don't want to run into your ex, for example. So
What's so interesting about all of this is it's really no different than humans. If we're stressed, we need enough rest, we need to exercise, and it's hard for people to think about their dogs like humans, but there's a lot of similarities. So that's
absolutely.
such a wonderful tip. Like, think about if your dog was your child or yourself, instead of thinking that he's just a dog.
Yeah. And exactly. And loving your dog, I believe, is about understanding how similar dogs are to people and also how different, because they're just animals. They're very simple, kind of, and I say simple as an absolute compliment. They're just animals who don't understand the big complicated world of, finances and divorce and and all the things that can stress us out, but they still experience stress and they experience anxiety in all these kind of similar ways that I think possibly all mammals do. Maybe not all mammals, but certainly dogs do. There's a lot of science experiments that are coming out to prove how emotionally complex dogs are. That's another podcast topic. So enough exercise, enough rest. They need some consistent, somewhat consistent routines, good food. And one of the things that often gets overlooked about dogs specifically is, do they have good things to chew? Dogs love chewing on things. It's a wonderful stress reliever. And if we can all picture this, okay, let's say you're picturing a dog chewing on a bone on the ground. And if you watch the dog's face, they might start like, and when I say bone, I don't mean a literal bone, but an appropriate, safe chew toy that's rough, okay, not a soft toy, but a rough toy. A dog might start chewing and they might start licking on a toy with the front of their jaw, the front of their teeth. And then as that toy moves to their back molars at the back, and they really gnaw, and you can see like their whole jaw muscles at the back of their jaw is going, their eyes half close. They go into this beautiful, happy, happy doggy place. That it's a very, very soothing thing for dogs to have something good to chew on. So bearing in mind the general health of your dog and the shape of their jaw, find exciting, good, chewy things that your dog can gnaw on, which will help. It's a wonderful, wonderful stress. It's like Netflix for dogs. That's what
I
I always say.
never knew any of that. Now, I have a question. How about I talk to my dog a lot? I know my dog doesn't really know most of what I'm saying, but do you think that it helps both the owner and the dog? Like, I'll say, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. It's all good, sweetie. Like, I talk to him. Are you shaking your head? No, like, don't even bother. I mean, okay, everything on this podcast I've said has been wrong.
So I would answer that in two ways, Jackie. So the one is, you have to know yourself. And I know you, and if you are a naturally talkative person, it's likely that you're going to keep on talking to your dog, and it's also likely that your dog is used to it. So I'm not going to tell you to stop chit chatting with your dog. It's fine to chat to your dog, but this is what I like to share with my clients. When dogs are their happiest, they are silent. A dog that's making noise is either excited, maybe they're worried. And of course, there can be happy barks at the park. But the best way to communicate how you're feeling is not through your words, but through your breath. So are you breathing deeply? Are you yawning, for example? So yawning is a wonderful way to tell a dog to relax and that you're relaxed. Can be a sign of stress in dogs too, but it's a you kind of have to watch the dog's whole body. So sometimes inside of vets, like at the lobby of the vet, you'll see dogs are yawning because they're a little bit worried about what's about to happen. But it's also a great way for dogs to, just like people, to sort of settle down. So if you want to tell your dog it's okay, I don't recommend picking up a dog and looking at their face and saying, it's okay, like you would with a little baby,
Mhm.
but yawn and stretch out be as relaxed yourself as you want the dog to be, or you hope that your dog will be. And that is more effective. I do think dogs get used to us chit-chatting, but as you say, they don't really, obviously most of it doesn't register. It's just sort of noise in the background to them.
Well, with me, it's sort of like literally, I've lost count of how many times a day I'll say, "You are the love of my life. I love you so much, and you're my best friend." And what I say to him sometimes is, you're a huge part of this family, and we all need you, and you're very valuable. Like I'm trying to work on his self-esteem. He doesn't even know what I'm saying.
Okay, so Jackie, then I'll ask you, when you say that, does he wag his tail and open his eyes wide, or does he tuck his tail and walk away? What does he
He
do
does
when you talk?
different things. It's like it doesn't really affect him.
So
But I
I think,
will tell my listeners this. If it makes you feel better, I think that's okay. Like, I think Karis is right that you can't just be chit-chatty with your dog unless he's already used to it like mine. But, like, I don't know, maybe it makes you happy to say that because you feel that somewhere deep down he kind of knows and expects you to say that, and it's, like, comforting. I don't know. I'm
no,
not the dog expert.
and that's why I say, Jackie, I know you and you're a chatty person. So it's true. If you suddenly start talking to your dog, he'd wonder what's wrong with you because that's your natural, that's you, and that's always going to be you. So it is fine. But let me answer that question again by saying, watch your own dog and see how they like it. So I talked about my 3 dogs earlier. My dog, who doesn't like a lot of big emotions from people, he doesn't like to be chit-chatted to because he thinks maybe we're about to do something, and he feels like he's a working breed dog. So every time I talk to him, he thinks we're about to do a thing together. So if I don't talk to him, he relaxes, but he gets very excited if I talk to him. Whereas my other dogs who are a little bit more engaging, if I chat to them, they think it's great. And like, hey, what are we doing? So watch your own dog, see how they respond to the chit chat. Does it seem to make them happy? Does it seem to make them calm? And then if you're not quite sure, then just keep breathing deeper on them and be as relaxed and mellow as you can.
All right, I want to get into what can you do with your ex, soon to be ex. Obviously, you guys are at odds, you're getting divorced. What are some things you can do to help your dog? Obviously, we talked about not fighting in front of each other, not yelling. What else?
So if you are sharing your dog, and maybe you're doing a temporary share with the dog or something that you're trying for in the more long term, what can be very helpful is if you arrange a third party to transfer the dog for you, rather than meeting at your ex's door to swap the dog, which may become a bit of a fight, or it can be a stressful moment. So that's a really good suggestion. In the big picture, you have to be mindful how your dog is handling a shared situation, which is also a big part of the book that I talk about, because not all dogs handle it very well. But if it is something that you're doing, and especially if you feel emotional going to your ex's house or seeing that person, I promise your dog is aware of it. So I would instead either hire a dog walker, and I really recommend when you do this that you don't like have your best friend who also knows your boyfriend do it. If possible, if it's realistic for you, that's a time to maybe hire a dog walker who's a little bit more neutral in the whole situation to facilitate the movement, because the time that stresses dogs out is often the moment of the shift. So that's a really good idea. The other thing is that if you if you are going to share the dog with swap the dog with your ex, if you're not going to get a third person involved, I would have a similar place, or let's say the same place where you always do the swapping of the dog. So rather than having your ex come to your house or you go to their house, there should be, let's say, a special dog park. And you agree between you, the only time you go to that park is in a swapping day. So the dog knows what's coming. If the ex comes to the door and like knocks on the door to take the dog, you can often get dogs who are a bit anxious anytime the door knocks, because maybe they're excited or they're worried or they don't know if
That
they're
makes a
leaving.
lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's my other big suggestion, is that only at this particular, whatever it is, a cafe or a park, you only go there, then the dog understands. And then the rest of the time when you're not going to that park, the dog can relax and go, okay, well, it's, you know, it's not shifting or moving day, which is me putting my own language to it. So that's really helpful. The other thing is that, and I don't know, this is easier said than done, but you have to have the conversation about what's happening with the dog, not in front of the dog. I have stories of many clients whose ex has gone to the house and taken the dog. I mean, really, really unpleasant stories and dynamics where the dog is in the middle of something that is not for them to be in the middle of.
Wow.
So you need to be big enough with each other and love the dog enough to figure out what are you going to do with the dog, not right in front of it, not while you're holding the leash. Okay, not in none of those times. It's just not fair on the dog. And if you really can't manage that, then it's like some people I work with, they agree on a third person who's going to babysit the dog for a few days and no one's going to have contact. Sometimes that's easier on a dog. So those kind of things can help. And then the other thing is, if you are sharing your dog, there has to be some consistency between both houses. So if you let your dog sleep under the covers with you and your ex doesn't even let the dog on the couch, okay, that's very confusing for a dog. They don't know what the rules are. They you know, they'll get worried about trying, maybe get on the couch at the one person's house and they get shouted at. So there has to be consistency about what the dog is allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, and then they can settle into that. And there's got to be some kind of as much as possible, some consistency of routine and of food so that the dog's whole system and schedule doesn't go completely upside down when they're at a different house.
Wow. Okay, I was going to bring up one more thing. We're kind of running out of time, but what do you think about this? Now, I know when I was getting divorced, I would call my sister all the time and I would just go off about my divorce and my ex, and I would probably scream and be angry, and it was just bad vibes. I didn't have a dog then, but had I had a dog, don't you think that that's a no-no? Like, if you're gonna sit and complain about your ex-husband to someone, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but I don't think you want your dog in the room.
Yeah. I think that if you're the kind of person who comes home from work every day and complains about your boss and your dog is kind of used to that, then you can complain about your ex. It like you can, you know, that sort of thing is okay. But if it's out of character for you, then I would not, then you need to either leave home or you need to put yourself in a different room and turn on some music or turn on a television to mute the sound. If you have to scream, you have to scream. Like, I get it. I've been divorced twice. I know what those places feel like. So it's impossible to say, well, just don't get emotional, but do it mindfully. Don't scream. Certainly don't scream if your dog is in the room. That's really not fair for your dog. So just be mindful of it and how affected dogs are by big emotions that people have. It's just not fair on them. You have to be bigger than that to really love your dog. You have to be, you just, it's just not fair on them.
All right, I want to end this on a positive note. Karis, how many couples do you think you've worked with where you've seen that they got divorced, their dogs were a little anxious, but then the dog turned out just fine and is fine at both people's homes? Because I want people to know that there's definitely hope.
Yeah, there's always hope. I would put that in more of a percentage than these amounts. It's like the only way that I can answer that is when it does work out, the people have to be okay with each other. It doesn't work out well if the people can't make peace with each other. It's rare in my experience that the dogs will be happy with it. When the people are mellow, when they work through their own stuff, and when they can see past the dog as sort of a symbol of the relationship, then it can be a lot easier for the dog and for the people. But the number one thing that makes it successful is when people prioritize the dog and how the dog is feeling rather than seeing the dog as something that they've won or lost.
Wow. So really, if you can't get along with your ex, you really should not share custody of that dog. He should be at one person's house.
It's to oversimplify things. You can say yes, but there are nuances with it and there's ways to work with it. But the other way that I would say that is if you as a person cannot get along with your ex and you are sharing your dog, you're forcing yourself to stay in touch with them for all those years.
Wow, that's a whole nother podcast.
That's a
Because
whole
you're
other
right.
podcast.
That is a form of attachment, and you are going to be bound to your ex. So if you want a clean break, sharing a dog might not be the best thing.
That's our next podcast right there, Jackie.
Absolutely. Karis, thank you so much for taking time to do this. I loved all of your advice. I realized how little I know about dog behavior therapy, but I am definitely a really good dog owner. I just do things my way, but I learned a lot from you. I really appreciate it. Once again, tell my listeners how they can reach you and how they can get your book.
You can visit my website, whokeepsthedog.com. There is a link there. You can see me for a free half an hour session if you want to talk about pet custody or your dog or your cat. You can set that up on my website. And if you want to buy the book, there is also a link there. You can click on it and you can buy it. And I hope you get huge benefit from it.
Well, thank you again for being here. And to my listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you want to find trusted, vetted divorce professionals, including Karis, you can go to my website, divorcedgirlsmiling.com. You can also go there to listen to more podcasts, read articles, download my mobile app, or sign up for my free consult. And again, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you real soon.